Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. Today I'm going to be creating a spring watering can using the new Redesign Spring release. For my project today, I'm going to be using this watering can that I got from IKEA a little while ago. I really love the shape of it. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in white first. I'm going to apply one coat, let it dry for about an hour, then come in and apply a second coat. This is going to make sure that my paint sticks and stays there. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Italian Ivory mineral paint. I'm going to be applying 2 coats of this over the entire watering can. I thought that I was probably going to end up doing a 2-toned look on this anyway, but I wanted to wait until I had most of my project completed before I decided on that. So I'm going in with a nice blank slate with this lovely creamy tone. When that was dry, I took out Redesign's new Springtime Bunny mold. I am so excited to finally be using this one. I'm going to begin by dusting my mold with cornstarch. I'm going to be using air dry clay today, and the cornstarch is going to help my clay to release. I'm then going to start working my dust air dry clay into our dad bunny, perhaps that's what we'll call him. I'm going to work the clay into that one, and then I'm going to flex the mold, flip it over, and you can see my casting comes out really easily. These molds are so beautifully detailed. I then moved on to the mum bunny, and I am again working my clay in, pushing that excess out, flexing that mold, and flipping it over definitely does help. If I have any extra clay around the outside, I'll just gently scrape that off, or I can use a wet wipe to help that as well. I'm then going to start working it into our sweet little girl bunny, and again just pushing that clay out. I know it's a little bit repetitive. If you're not confident with clay, you could definitely use resin in these instead. I'm going to be using my Sealy's Quickset wood glue on the back of each of my castings, making sure I've got that spread out, and then I'm going to start positioning my little bunnies on my watering can. So I'm going to have the dad bunny in the center, the mum bunny is going to go on the left hand side, and then we've got the sweet little girl bunny on the right hand side. This lovely mold also comes with some daisy style designs, so I'm going to dust those with cornstarch and then work my air dry clay into them. Now these were very delicate designs, so I was careful not to pull too much clay out, and again you definitely want that cornstarch in there. I'm then going to flex the mold, flip it over, and then very slowly start pulling my castings out. I'm then going to glue this daisy design on the right hand side next to the little girl bunny, and I'm also going to be adding one of those on the left. As you can see, the flower came off that one, but I can just glue that one back in place. I'm then going to cast another one of the daisy designs, and this one is also pretty delicate, so take your time when you are doing these, and I'm going to glue that one between the dad bunny and the little girl bunny. Again, I had another little piece break off, but I was able to really easily glue that back into position. Next, I am going to cast the smallest of the daisy designs. This one was a little bit easier to get out, in my opinion, and I'm going to be adding that one on the left-hand side of the dad bunny. I then added some cornstarch to this little fondant mold that I had in my stash. I think you can still get this one off Etsy, and I'm going to work my clay into the watering can design first. I did have the handle break off, but I was able to get that out, and I will just glue that in separately. I'm then going to be positioning that one between the mum and the dad bunny. I did, however, shorten off the spout section of the watering can, and then I'm going to start casting some of the pot designs from this little fondant mold. And I did end up squishing these. I sort of pressed them down so that they were a little bit bigger, and I'm having those go in front of each of the daisies that I have scattered in amongst our little bunnies. Next, I'm going to cast the little shovel fondant design there, and I'm going to be adding that one to our mama bunny to make it look like she's holding that little spade in her hand. I'm then going to be using this carrot fondant mold that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to be casting the smaller of the carrot designs. I thought it would be really sweet if the little girl bunny was holding that in her hands. I then decided that I would cast a couple of the smaller pot castings there so that I could have it look like there was some pots sort of falling over. So I'm definitely going for a real garden theme with today's project. Next, I took out this Easter wreaths mold by Redesign. This is from their release last year. I've dusted one of the wreath designs with cornstarch, and now I'm working my clay into the mold and just pushing that excess out. And then I'm going to flex that mold, and just like before, I'm going to flip the mold over, and gravity is going to help me get that casting out. I'm going to add glue to the back of it. I've already pulled the wreath mold apart a little bit because I'm going to have it wrapping around the top section of the watering can there. So remember that you can pull these molds apart, you can repurpose them to suit whatever your project is. I did end up having to do some extra castings just so I could continue that floral design around the top section of my watering can. For the other side of the watering can, I went in and ended up casting 3 more of the larger daisy designs, a couple of the single daisy designs and a couple of the smaller ones, and I just sort of alternated them across the back until I was happy with how that looked. And I really just love these on their own. They really are a beautiful design. I then took out Redesign's Lavender Harvest mold, and I'm going to be casting one of each of the little bees from that mold, and I'm going to be gluing those over the top of our daisies. Again, this definitely fits with our garden theme, and then I'm going to glue the other one down as well. I let my castings dry overnight, and the next day I came back in with some more of that Italian ivory. This time I am dabbing and stippling that paint on. This is definitely going to help me get into all of those details and those crevices. I am using a pointed tip eco brush. I think this might be a size 12. So I'm going to cover all of my molds in that same Italian ivory. I let that dry completely, and then I took out Redesign's new Blossom Bunnies transfer. This is from their new release, and as you can see, there are 3 pages of beautiful bunnies and florals and some lovely typography in this one. I am going to be using the carrot patch text. I thought that would go perfectly with our bunnies, so I'm going to cut that design out. And then I'm also going to cut out a couple of these little butterflies as well. I am going to take the backing off my transfer, and then I'm going to position it in place. You can see I don't have the whole thing stuck down. Because of the shape and the curve of the watering can, I then went in and added some little cuts near where we have the carrot patch text. So I don't have that stuck down. I want to work in sections here. I probably should have thought about that before I added it, but I didn't realize how much the curve of the watering can was going to affect how that text sat, and I wanted to make sure that it was as straight as possible. So I'm getting all the rest of that transfer down, working in sections, lifting that plastic up as I rub and burnish down, and then I am going to actually reposition the transfer so that I can have the word patch be straighter than it would be if I just left it there. I'm then going to move on to using those little butterflies. I'm going to cut them so that they're separate, and then I'm going to position them either side of the text design but down the bottom. Next, I'm going to use Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin to seal over the top of my transfer. I'm going to be layering in some other products, and I want to make sure that transfer isn't affected. I then took out Paint Couture's Crackle Step 1, and I'm going to be applying that in a dabbing and stippling motion over the top of the center part of the watering can to start off with. I'm not going over the top of our castings. I don't want it to go on the bunnies or the florals. I want it to be in the background. I'm also going to add it to the top section of the watering can, but again, not going on my castings. I'm also not going to add it to the handle or the spout of the watering can, but I do want to give this a vintage look, and I love the look of Crackle on my projects. I let that dry for about 30 minutes, and then when it was tacky and sticky to the touch, I came in with Crackle Step 2, applying it in exactly the same spots in that same dabbing and stippling motion. Once that was completely dry, I took out Paint Couture's Van Dyke Brown Glaze, and I'm going to begin by adding it to my casting. So I'm really working it into all of the details. This is going to help provide some definition, but I am going to work in sections so that it doesn't soak in too quickly. I'm then going to be using a wet wipe to pull it back, and as I'm pulling it back from the section that has the crackle, those lovely little cracks are starting to show through. We are going for a vintage look here, so I don't don't need it to look super uniform. I'm going to continue working my way around the watering can, adding that glaze over the entire middle section and the top section. But again, I'm not adding it to the handle or the spout because I am thinking that I'm going to be adding in some different colored paint that I'll decide on a bit later. So I'm just going to continue to work my way around until I have that entire section covered in glaze. And this is definitely something I love to do. I like to add the glaze down first so that I can see all that definition, and then I come in with my paint over the top. If I inspire you to try any of the Paint Couture products used in today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Once the glaze was completely dry, I took out Paint Couture's Abundance Mineral Paint. I'm going to go in and start adding it to the dress on our mama bunny to begin with. Now she's also wearing an apron, so I'm being careful not to get it on that particular section. But I just really love this beautiful blue tone. I think it is perfect for spring and Easter projects. So I'm just going to continue to work my way across, adding it to the mama bunny, and then I am going to continue on over to the dad bunny. I'm going to be adding that over the top of his coat, and I am also going to be adding just a little bit on the little girl bunny, just a little bow on her. I then took out Paint Couture's Vintage Moss acrylic mineral paint, and I'm going to add that to the sleeves of our little girl bunny's dress. Now she's also wearing an apron, so I'm going to avoid that area and just have that lovely green peeking out underneath the apron down the bottom. I'm then going to continue that same green on, I think it's a waistcoat on our little dad bunny in the center there. I'm going to leave some gaps where the buttons are. And then I took out Paint Couture's Pine Cone chalk paint. I'm going to be adding that over the top of his pants. And then while that paint was still wet, I decided to come in and blend in a little bit of that vintage moss just to give the brown tone of the paints a bit of an earthier tone. Next, I took out Paint Couture's Sugar Plum mineral paint, and I'm going to be adding that to the pocket on the mum's apron. I really like the color contrast there with that lovely pinky tone with the Abundance mineral paint, and then I'm going to add it to the little ribbon around the top section of her apron. And then I'm also going to add it to the base, so it's like a little trim on her apron there, and then also around the collar as well. Next, I started painting in some little flowers on the girl bunny's apron there. It's a little bit trickier to see, but there are some flowers there, and I'm also adding it to the little shoes that we're pretending that she's wearing and some little buttons on her front there. I then took out Paint Couture's Pitch Black chalk paint. I'm going to add that to the dad bunny's shoes. So just keeping that really simple, adding that black in there. And then I took out Paint Couture's Light Brown Sugar Antiquing Glaze, and I'm going to be painting over the top of the faces and the arms and the legs of the bunny. So this is going to be the color of their fur. I kept it really simple. I didn't want to go too dark. I'm going up on the ears as well, but leaving a gap for the inside of the ears. I'm also going to repeat the same process on the mum bunny and the little girl bunny as well. When that was dry, I took out Paint Couture's Farmhouse Linen chalk paint. I'm going to be applying that with a small artist brush to the bunny's eyes. So this is going to be the whites of the bunny's eyes. If I go out of the area that I want that white to be, I can use a wet wipe to pull some of that back, and I did do that on a few occasions just to tidy that up. I'm then going to continue to use that Farmhouse Linen on the mum bunny's apron. I am not worried if I don't get full coverage because I want to still see some of that definition that we created by using the glaze. So I'm not going for perfect here. I'm also then going to go in and add it to the little bunny girl's apron. I did end up going over the top of the sugar plum that I added on the little girl bunny. It just felt a little bit too stark. I wanted something a little bit softer for her, so I do end up going over the top of the buttons and the flowers that I painted in, but I do come in a little bit later with a lighter pink. I'm also going to quickly go in and add it to the sleeves of the Mama Bunny's dress, and of course the bottom of her apron. I also added a couple of dots on the Dad Bunny's buttons. I then took out Paint Couture's French Rose mineral paint. I'm going to add a little triangle nose on each of the bunnies. I love this lovely soft pink. It's perfect for adding in this sort of detail. And then I decided to use it on the inside section of the bunny ears as well. Once I was finished adding it to the ears, I went in and added some little pink flowers on our little girl bunny's apron, and also a couple of buttons for her as well. I then went in with some black paint, and I'm going to start adding the pupils to our sweet little bunny faces. And this is definitely something I recommend that you have a little wet wipe with you. I did have to wipe it back a couple of times to get the look that I wanted, but I've just used a really small artist brush for this. I then used that same black for a couple of buttons on the bunny's coat. I then went in and added some whiskers. They felt a little bit stark to me, so I do end up using my finger just to dab back some of that paint so it's a bit more faded. And I'm going to repeat the same process for each of the bunnies, just adding those whiskers on, wiping a little bit of that paint back so it's not too stark. I'm then going to go back in and add just a little bit more white to the bunny's eyes so that I can soften the look a little bit. Now, it's obviously up to you how you decide to do the eyes. I just like to go back in with a little bit more white. I think it sort of softens that stare. I then took out Paint Couture's Firelight mineral paint. I'm going to use this to go over the top of the carrot that our little girl bunny is holding onto. And then I'm also going to be adding it to the little pots. I wanted them to look like terracotta pots, so I'm just going to go in and add those to the bottom. I then took out Paint Couture's Tuscan Sun mineral paint, and I'm going to be adding that to the center of each of the flowers. Now, to me, these look like daisies, but you could definitely turn these into sunflowers if you wanted that to be the flower that you have there. It's definitely something that you can customize just by changing up the center color and obviously the petals. For the flower stems, I'm going to be using Paint Couture's Basil chalk paint. I'm going along with a small artist brush and adding it to the stem and the leaves. I really love this beautiful green tone. If you wanted, obviously, you could come in with a darker color. Evergreen chalk mineral paint by Paint Couture is a great option. I definitely wanted to keep things a little bit lighter though for this project. So I'm just going to continue to work my way around and adding that Basil chalk paint to each of the flower stems. Once that was dry, I took out Farmhouse linen again, and I am going to be adding that over the top of the leaves of our daisies, our petals. I am going over the top, but I'm almost dry brushing it. I'm not using much paint on there, and I don't want to go all the way into the center. I still want to be able to see a lot of that glaze, so I'm being careful about how I apply it, sometimes going horizontally so I can skip the details of those leaves. And again, go in with whatever color suits your style. I just really love the look of this bright white. When they were dry, I used that same brush, but I brushed off the excess, and now I'm dry brushing on that Farmhouse linen onto the terracotta pots to give them more of a weathered look. Next, I'm going to use that same Basil chalk paint on the stem of the carrot, and then I used the French Rose mineral paint on the little watering can that we have down the bottom. Next, I added Tuscan Sun mineral paint to parts of the bee castings that we have on the other side. And then when that was dry, I used pitch black chalk paint to go in and paint the details on the head and the legs, and obviously the little stripes on the bee's body. I then went in with that same brush with the pitch black, and I'm going to add just a little bit of that black to the mouth details of the bunny. Again, I don't want them to be too bright or too obvious, but just a little bit of definition. I then went in and added a little bit of black to the texture on the carrot casting. And then I decided that I would use Basil chalk paint on the spout of the watering can and on the handle. Now, this probably would have been a better idea for me to do before I went in with all my castings, but as I said before, I wasn't 100% sure on what color I was going to do, so I did want to wait until I was almost completely finished my project before I decided on that. So I am using a larger brush for most of this part, but I did go in with a smaller artist brush to get around the details of the flowers near the spout, and I ended up going back in and touching up a couple of sections where I got that green on the white of the flowers. And of course I'm going in on the handle, and it took me 2 coats of the Basil chalk paint to get the coverage that I wanted. Next, I'm going to add that same Basil chalk paint over the top of the flowers up the top of the watering can. I'm going to work in sections though. I'm really working that basil into the details. I'm going to use it almost like a glaze. And then I'm going to come in and use a wet wipe to pull back that paint from the top sections of the flower, and so that it's not too intense in the other areas. Because there's a lot going on the other sections of the watering can, I definitely wanted to keep the top section pretty simple. When that was dry, I went in and did some dry brushing with the Farmhouse linen. So I'm offloading most of my paint onto a paper towel, and then I am lightly brushing that Farmhouse linen over the top of the florals. And I love how this is lightening things up. It is highlighting the top sections and the top details of the castings. And then I went in with the Tuscan Sun mineral paint, and I'm adding that just to the center of a couple of the flowers. So this is going to help tie in with the bottom section of the watering can. When that was dry, I went in and did some dry brushing of that Farmhouse linen over the top of our sweet little rabbits. This is going to lighten them up a little, and it's also going to draw attention to the high points. It's going to add more detail and definition, and it's just going to soften the overall look. When that was dry, I decided that I wanted to use Paint Couture's Mystic Grey on the Mama's gardening spade. I thought it sort of blended into the background a bit too much. And I also went over a couple of the Dad Bunny's buttons as well. And then I went back in and did a little bit more dry brushing. I then went in and added the dry brushing to the rest of the flowers and the bees. And I just love how this softens and finishes the look. Finally, I sealed my entire project with Paint Couture's Extreme Guard in Satin. And here's a look at our finished spring watering can. I love how this turned out. That springtime bunny mold and the blossom bunny transfer go perfectly together. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today, including the new redesigned spring release, on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.